Welcome to Diverse for Cons discussion, Talking It Out, Being Black in America, featuring panelists Saja Butler, Phil Donaldson, Anthony McGlone, with a history of Juneteenth by Phil, and musical performances by Saja and Anthony. Please note we're recording this event, and the panelists will decide afterward whether to share this recording with all registered attendees. First, an excerpt from Colorado State University's land acknowledgement from their website, colostate.edu. We acknowledge with respect that the land we are on today is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and affirmed. We accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion. And significantly, that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. It's my pleasure to introduce the panelists. Saja Butler is the owner of Urban Monk Studios, a music studio in Fort Collins specializing in banjo, uke, and voice lessons, as well as stage performance and ensemble classes for adults. She's also a member of Lois and the Lantern, as well as a solo artist. Phil Donaldson is VP Marketing and Creative at Propel Growth, a business-to-business marketing consultancy serving the financial technology space. With 25 plus years of experience, Phil has helped companies with branding, content development, creative direction, and media production. He's also an accomplished composer and musician. Anthony P. McGlone is a classically trained tenor who specializes in the music of African-American composers of art song. He is a voice teacher as well as a social justice advocate. And Phil is going to tell us a brief history of Juneteenth. I'll give it over to Phil. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Jubilee Day, Freedom Day, Emancipation Day, Juneteenth, Independence Day. These are some of the names describing the events of June 19th, 1865, commonly recognized in the African American community as Juneteenth. On September 22, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. It announced that all enslaved persons in the former Confederate States of America in rebellion and not under Union protection were to be freed. The executive order was to take place on January 1st, 1863. Union troops were dispatched throughout the Confederacy to inform slaves that they were free and to enforce the new law. During the Civil War, many Southern slave owners fled to Texas to escape the fighting, and by 1865 increased the enslaved population to an estimated 250,000 people. As it was more geographically isolated, Texas was not a battleground. Slaves in that state weren't aware of their freedom unless they escaped. To enforce the Emancipation Proclamation, Union Army General Major Gordon Granger was sent to Galveston Island with federal troops to occupy Texas on behalf of the federal government. On June 19th, 1865, Granger publicly read General Order Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. Now, before Granger finished reading the decree, many former slaves began to exercise their newfound freedom by fleeing the scene. This event has come to be known as the scatter. General Order Number 3 was met with great resistance. Many former slaves were bullied and lynched by former Confederate soldiers as well as former slave patrol members. This intransigence ultimately led to the formation of the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacy groups that have continued the tradition of injustice against African American people. The first Juneteenth celebration took place in 1866 with the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation, singing of hymns and spiritual songs, as well as the preaching of sermons. In 1968, following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Ralph Abernathy's Poor People's March brought Juneteenth to national attention. Today, Juneteenth is celebrated by African Americans and is recognized by many over July 4th as Independence Day. Now, while Juneteenth is often referred to as the traditional end of slavery in Texas, it took a series of Texas Supreme Court decisions between 1868 and 1874 for the freedom of formerly enslaved people to gain legal status. In 1979, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. Today, Juneteenth is celebrated with parades, cookouts, races, and rodeos. Various cities even hold contests to crown a Miss Juneteenth. Now, right now, 47 states recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday, while efforts to make it a national holiday have so far stalled in Congress. Although June 19th marks the end of slavery in America, African Americans still endure injustices that threaten our freedoms, our rights as Americans, as well as our very lives. Clearly, the struggle for equality continues.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce Anthony McGlone, who will perform a song for us.
Hi, everybody!
Hi,
It's good to see so many people that's been impactful in my life and have been a part of the reason why I'm here today, and that have loved on me and that have poured into me. And I had to step away because I got a little bit beklempt. Just thinking about my experiences in Colorado and the love that I experienced there and the joy that yes, it's just a lot. So I'm going to sing today, Love's in Need of Love Today. Oh, by the way, I'm in New York City. We are having a heat wave. I don't have an air conditioner right now, so if I'm looking crazy and sweating, it's because it's hot. But I want to sing for you all today, Love's in Need of Love Today by Stevie Wonder. And the reason why I picked this song is because we can find ourselves in many moments where we don't agree about certain things, right? And we don't have to agree. We don't have to be like, yeah, I support this, I support that. Black lives matter, but blue lives matter. And like around the corner and down the street, people's lives matter. And we can get like caught up in the nitpicky things. But at the end of the day, we have a human experience that we must always cherish and love. And that love is the great unifier in our lives, right? Love is what keeps us going. And if we lose sight of that, we lose sight of why we live and why we are. Okay. Good morning or evening, friends. Here's your friendly announcer. I've got serious news to share with everybody. What I'm about to say could be the world's disaster, could turn your joy and laughter to tears and pain. And that's love's in need of love today, yeah. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Hate going round, breaking every heart. Stop it, please, before it goes too far. Yeah. Do 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 do. The force of evil plans to make you feel its possession, and it will if you let it destroy everybody. We all must take precautionary measures. If love that please you treasure, then hear me when I say love's in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Oh, hate's going round, breaking every heart. Stop it, please, before it goes too far. Love's in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Oh, hate's going round, breaking every heart. Stop it, please, before it goes too far. Just send the world love.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Come on.
We are going to start now with the panel discussion, and this will be about 20 to 30 minutes to address about four questions. And I'm going to ask each panelist to, before they give their answer to the first question, to take a minute or two to expand on your bio and say a few things about yourself, your background, your connection to Fort Collins. So the first question is, and I will read the three parts of this question, and you can think about it, and we can feel comfortable with silence as you're thinking about your answers to these questions. What has been your reaction to the latest incidents of racial injustice and to the global protests against police brutality and the killing of George Floyd by police? What has been your reaction to the white people who have been speaking up to acknowledge their privilege in our society? And what has been your reaction to people who have taken offense to the discussion of white privilege and to those who have mocked the death of George Floyd?
Anthony, brother man, that was solid. Good job. I have that album, one of my favorite albums of all time. Love,
Game changer. Life changer.
Well done, King. Well done. So the answers to the questions, I've been angry to relieved. The first answer to your first question is just I'm finally glad we're dealing with this. I feel like we've had a 400-year-old boil on the butt of America, and that is popped and it's butt ass nasty, but it's funky. But we need to sift through the funk because it's been suppressed, as well as every black person in America. We've had to adhere to white America, meaning how white America lives to be in this country. We can't fully be black. We are even taught when we are in interviews or anything to talk white so we can have white people feel more comfortable in interviews. When we're getting a job, when we are pulled over by the police, we are asked to straighten our hair. It is all because of white privilege that is now being seen from 2017 2016 when Trump was elected to now by white America. So what is happening right now is, when George Floyd got murdered, I was like, oh, here we go. This is it. This is the revolution. This is the beginning. And the relief of many black people, all of us, we finally get to express what we've been wanting to express and not believed for a long time. I've had friends, white friends, for many years, when I tried to talk about this, tell me to be quiet or that's not true. They've literally walked out of the room. And finally, we're being listened to. Unfortunately, it was due to the fact that a man's neck was crushed. But the sacrifices were made for this. My latest post today is that we have PSD, we have racial trauma. We are releasing huge amounts of triggers from all these videos. I can't even watch many of these videos. Many black people cannot, because it just keeps reminding us of what we experienced ourselves, being pulled over, being watched in stores, just being called, the N-word over and over. I was president of my class in high school, and I couldn't go to a party because I was black of my best friend. These kind of things you hold on tight to. How am I reacting to people who are not wanting to accept this? I'm actually having compassion, because I told one of my white friends, I said, I couldn't imagine what it's like to learn 400 years of history in the past 3 weeks to 3.5 years. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what is happening with white America. We are finally like, oh Lord, finally, we've been trying to say it, but that is what is going on. So white America has to go through the 6 stages of grief here. They are having to first, obviously go through denial. It's just basically 6 stages of grief: denial, depression, bargaining, acceptance, and that all. Right now we have denial and anger, and it is going to have to happen. And then you're going to have to, obviously the videos itself from.
It looks like we lost a. Anthony, why don't you pick it up while we're waiting for Saja to reconnect? I'm going to,
So
you are unmuted. And you know what, before you begin, I just wanted to remind everybody, group guidelines: be kind and compassionate, listen attentively to understand, not to respond. Keep your questions and comments brief, so when we get to that section, so that others may have the opportunity to ask questions. And what's heard here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. And Anthony, if you want to expand a little bit on your bio and continue answering that question, that'd be great.
All right, so my bio: I'm a Morehouse man. I am the product of a black-owned real estate company in Detroit. I went to HBCU, Morehouse College, bless her name. We just got $40 million from the people that own Netflix. For me, as a black man, living in America, so I feel like I'm triply traumatized, because I'm black, I'm male, and I'm gay. So, I'm always fighting, right? And this incident with George Floyd, I think, is the universe being self-correcting and self-maintaining, in the sense that something had to give, right? Because living in Colorado, and this is just geographics, right? There are not enough black people that live in Colorado for the white people that live there to even think that there's a problem. Okay? If you don't see it every day, and I've always said this is just geographics, right? Geography says black people didn't go to the cold. We went to the warm. We knew where it was warm, so that's where we went, right? If you don't see it every day, if you don't know it, then you're not going to even think, you're not going to be remotely even engaged in it. It was only until I went to Colorado. So I'm from Detroit. I had never in my life thought I would ever be spending 3.5 years in Colorado, but that's what the universe had decided for me. And to understand that there were people who had never had a black friend, never had black people over their house that were not like people that had a service to them, but were they just their friends, was an eye-opener for me. And coming to Colorado and having racism happen to me so overtly, the first week I was there was very troubling for me. Like literally when they said, hey, look at the niggers, it was 4 black men just walking down the street. And somebody was so okay with it that they would holler that at us. I feel like the country is having a rude awakening with its own history, because it says the land of the free and home of the brave, but it wasn't for everybody. It was for white, straight males. And then if you were a byproduct of their thinking, of their lifestyle, of their desire or necessity, then you got grandfathered into that. And so to have to deal with, whitewashed history, to only understand that we only celebrate Black history in the coldest, shortest month of the year. And that was a give because he needed to do it. Like we have to take ourselves to the next level. We have to be uncomfortable. We have to be challenged with our own thinking in order for us to make a difference, in order for us to get to the next place. So that's my take on that.
Thank you, Anthony. Phil, would you like to say a few more things about yourself and your connection to Fort Collins before answering that question?
Yeah, sure. My wife and I moved to Fort Collins about 4.5 years ago. We moved here from New Jersey, where actually the New York, New Jersey metro area, I found that I was treated more like a criminal out there and treated more suspect there than I have in Fort Collins. But basically, having grown up in various parts of America, from Los Angeles, through other cities, I basically, have witnessed and had to deal with either the inequities or just some of the microaggressions, the overt aggressions, the inequities of just being Black in America. Now, we moved here about 4.5 years ago, and I would joke that when I got here, I raised the African American population by about 10%, because there really aren't a lot of Black people here, and I've been fortunate to be able to have conversations about race with people in Fort Collins in various ways. But getting to the George Floyd murder, when I first heard about it, I went online to actually watch the video, and I forced myself to watch it the whole time, the whole 9 minutes. And I mean, it was chilling. It was difficult to watch. I don't think I want to watch it again, but I felt I needed to watch it just to be able to just sort of remember that feeling, to remember the look on the police officer's face, to hear just the utter anguish of George Floyd's voice saying that I can't breathe, crying out for his mother in the last moments of his life. And the thing about it is, it was a horrible tragedy, and it's not the only one that's been happening in America. It's the one that was documented in its entirety. And I've told people who have asked me about watching the video and about America and the world seeing the video, I said, this is incontrovertible evidence, and it's basically, an almost 9-minute snuff video that people have been watching. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a Zoom call having a conversation about race, and the other brother who was on with us had raised Emmett Till, which was like probably the first major public murder that certainly white America, has been hearing about lately. And the thing about it is, between Emmett Till all the way up to George Floyd, there have been some things that have been documented, but most of it is not. And even when Trayvon Martin was murdered, neighbors in Princeton, we were talking about it. And I basically said, well, you know, that one incident that you saw, there were probably 5 or more other incidents that have taken place that no one knows about, that no one gets to hear about because it gets swept under the rug, it gets denied, it gets excused, that kind of thing. So I guess the positive thing that came out of the George Floyd video and the George Floyd incident is that America has gotten to see what some of white America has tried to deny, tried to hide from, and what Black America has been trying to tell America for generations and generations. And I mean, this sort of thing, you know, was happening even before Emmett Till. I mean, you heard when I was reading the Juneteenth history. Basically, it went from slave patrols to the KKK and just the terrorization of African Americans from then all the way up until now. But the other thing that was good that came out of it is that, yes, now white America is basically acknowledging the violence that has been taking place toward Black people in America. And now the stories that we've been trying to tell, either personal stories or stories of friends and family, are now, they have more credence because there's been an official historical, you know, document of something that is just, it just has to stop. I mean, this is the sort of thing that has to stop. And it's been interesting that for the first time, there have been more white people to ask me questions and listen to the stories than have ever been before. So a conversation is beginning.
Phil, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you please turn up your volume? It sounds like some people are having trouble hearing.
Okay, hold on.
Please give thumbs up if you're able to hear Phil. Okay, might just be 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, what's that sound?
Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, I hear music. Oh, hold on. So anyway, yeah, sorry. So basically, the stories that you know, that Black people have been telling are now being listened to, and conversations are starting. And I mean, even on Facebook, I even have seen white people acknowledging the white privilege, whereas before you would mention the term white privilege and people would get upset and, you know, and angry and defensive towards it. But now that the conversation has started, it started with Robin DiAngelo just coining that phrase, in her book White Fragility. People are starting to acknowledge the privilege that white Americans have had since the beginning of this country. And it's interesting. There've been conversations about the reconciliation of Black America and white America. But I recently heard someone mention the fact that, well, you can't have reconciliation unless you've had a healthy relationship from the beginning. And Black America and white America, as a result of the slave trade, we've had a very broken, for the most part, relationship. And so I don't know that reconciliation would be the word today, but perhaps healing would be the word. And on the other side, basically, it's been really disturbing, but not surprising, given the current socio-political climate of the people who, basically have been against the whole Black Lives Matter movement, or even just saying the words Black Lives Matter, they want to say that it's merely just a political, ploy to, of the lefties or whatever. But I recently saw a video, someone shared with me a video of a Fort Collins woman, an African-American woman who works at Starbucks. And she was very upset in this video because a white customer had come in wanting to speak to the manager. And she basically said, you can speak to me. And he proceeded to tell her that he was no longer going to be patronizing Starbucks because the employees are forced to wear Black Lives Matter gear, and it's a political, it's a political thing. And as a result, I'm not bringing my business here anymore. And the woman replied, look, the color of my skin is not a political statement. When I say that my Black life matters, I mean my life matters. And it's very upsetting to have people either say it's just a political ploy, or to say, well, just get over it. Everybody has trouble, in life, and any way that they can find to dismiss and discount what has been happening to us in this country, not only vis-a-vis our safety, our very lives, but our livelihoods, to be able to get a fair shake at getting a job, to be, even with subtle things, just a smile. I mean, I showed I told my wife about, living in Jersey and New York, and, being at a fast food restaurant or a store and having a white person in front of me, and they get a smile. And then when I walk up, and even if I'm smiling, the smile of the cashier or receptionist, it dissipates, it vanishes. So just even in terms of little things like that, it's really, it's really tough to be able to have a conversation when people don't want to, they don't want to admit the realities, and they try to pull away and try to not have the conversation.
Thank you, Phil. We're going to go to Anthony. I'm going to unmute Anthony, and then we'll return to Saja to finish up on that question. Anthony, go ahead and accept the unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. This is still kind of new to me. This conversation can go so many different ways. I think me being in Fort Collins, Colorado, so one of my life tenets, let me say this. One of my life tenets is that the universe is self-maintaining and self-correcting, right? Me coming to Colorado helped to save my life. Me coming to Colorado allowed me to forge a relationship with a group of people, the Millers, many of them are on this call right now. I call them my Colorado family, that basically, like, through just a series of happenstance, reached out to me and like took me in. And I mean, they are white people. And I'm this black guy from Detroit. And it was just like home. It was such a beautiful, even though I was a tenant, I was still a tenant. But it was a beautiful 3 years of my life that have shaped me to be the man that I am today. It was in no way, shape, or form. I have never experienced anything like that with a group of people that were not black. Never. I'm talking about the family connections. I'm talking about the love for each other. I'm talking about the support of each other. I'm talking about the honesty. Like, it was such an amazing experience to live in that house and to have the support from them, that it helped to color my whole experience in Fort Collins, because most of my friends told me, you should leave. When I told my friends what happened to me in Fort Collins, they were like, why are you even still there? I was like, well, first of all, I have a contract. And second of all, I like it here. They were like, well, your contract is over, so you really should just leave. And I was like, well, there's more work for me to do here. I didn't know at the time when Carol reached out to me and was like, can you stay, like offer me a place to stay to do Winters Around the World. I didn't know that I would still be there in 2019. Like that was not on my trajectory at all. I was coming to Colorado to leave. But in those moments, it allowed me to understand that just because you don't look like me doesn't mean that you don't understand my life. And Herb Miller and I used to have fundamental conversations about what it was like to be a white male to go and, I hope I'm answering the question.
There we am.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Wonderful, wonderful. If you need me to turn up, let me know. But yeah, I'm down in the dungeon, so I had to switch to the more local network here. But yeah, basically what Anthony is saying, it's hard. You know, we're trying. I've never lived in a whiter town than Fort Collins, and even after 20 years, it's hard to see like, wow, a lot of people here and a lot of people here from the Midwest have never really hung out with anyone outside of their race. Because the white race is the only one that has the option out of many races actually all the races in America that have the option to do so via gated communities, private schools, all these other exclusive clubs and buildings and things that have been birthed since slavery. So I've had students who told me, you're the first black person I've ever seen live. I mean, that just blows my mind. And this was just a few years ago. It's clear to see when white people here are just not used to you versus being racist. So that's a question, especially here, that we have to answer. It's like, so how do you begin to be around people outside of your race, especially, and also learn about the history of America that includes all of the races, right? So it'd be interesting. I've talked to my white friends here, and one of my friends said a really interesting thing. She said, I thought that equality was enough. I thought equality, that meant everybody had it, we all just did it and nothing else was needed. And I said, that's fair, but equality only is valid when all of us believe that. And so that is where I think a lot of people, especially in towns that are predominantly white, with white America that is just getting used to hanging outside of the race, that is what is happening right now. You're learning two things.
I'll go on and continue also. Because I just want to tell the story. My wife, before she became my wife, I would tell her about the things that I've noticed in my many years of just experiencing racism in America, and she like other folks would respond like, well, maybe you misread the situation, or maybe you're being overly sensitive, or this, that, or the other. But it wasn't until we sat down with two other black folk around a table at dinner in New Jersey, and the three of us black folk told our stories. And then it finally started to sink in that basically, she knew that her life was a privileged life compared to that of Black Americans. And I'm not even talking about like the overt racism. I mean, I'm talking about little things. I mean, I have been stopped while walking on foot by police and told that I fit a description when I didn't, and even one of the officers had admitted that I wasn't. I didn't even vaguely fit the description, but they still kept me, and until the victim drove by. I was nearly run down in Cleveland, Ohio by a car coming the opposite direction when I was riding my bike when I was a kid. we moved into a neighborhood that was actually becoming a white flight neighborhood back in 1966. And there was a girl in our neighborhood who used to, greet us as we were walking to school. And then one day she was there with, a bunch of her friends, and we said hello to her, which we normally did. And she says, "Oh, we don't talk to niggers." And so when I graduated high school in Michigan, I was going to go back to Cleveland. But my father said, "No, I do not want you to experience the racism that's going on in America," especially because I was at the prime age when, I was going to be either considered a threat or a suspect. And so I went to Montreal for 5 years, where I basically didn't live with the same psychological baggage that I do in the United States, by having to always kind of, keep my attention, on the world around me, to keep tabs on my safety, and just other things that, that we have to do. I mean, there are things that we have to do that white people don't even have to think about. As a black male, many black males have to signal to white people that we're not dangerous by just doing something as simple as smiling. Now, I tend to be a normally friendly person, and I like to smile. So moving to Fort Collins, I mean, living in New York, you can't, you're really not supposed to look people in the eye or, say hello on the street or be friendly or anything like that. And as a kid in California, I was always used to that. And then, I was used to that in Montreal as well. Moving to New York, I had to put on the blinders, had to put on the great stone face. But having moved to Fort Collins, I get to, look people in the eye and say hello. But even here, I can walk down the street and, women will clutch their purse. Sometimes people will purposely look away so as not to catch my attention. There are places I do not go alone, not necessarily just because of my safety, but like there are really wonderful walking and biking trails here in Fort Collins. They're kind of semi-private, and I don't want to walk them alone. I use my wife as my chaperone. She's white, and because I don't want to deal with somebody exhibiting discomfort in my presence, or even even having an incident where somebody might accuse me of something that I didn't do. There might be a Karen that might confront me or something like that. So there are things I have to be careful of. I will not walk in my own neighborhood after dark alone, because I don't want anybody to call the police saying there's somebody suspicious outside. So, there are things we have to do that white folk don't even have to think about. And we don't have the luxury, the way white people do, especially white males, of venting our full anger. We have to be very, very, very circumspect about things like that, because otherwise we will be misconstrued as
join the meeting,
as overly angry or savage or about to pounce on someone. So if you remember the debates when Obama was running for president, his body language, he was very, very careful to not, look threatening. He didn't, and he always had to be a class act, and you didn't see him yelling at people, name calling, all that kind of stuff. Because as a black man, if he had shown just the slightest bit of anger, they would have said, "See, that's what they're like. See, there you go. There you go." And even then, I mean, they still they still, there were still those who, who were going to, blame him for something.
Thank you, Phil. We're going to move now. We can continue with this question if the other panelists haven't answered it yet, but we're going to continue on with Saja's performance. Saja, we're going to unmute you so you can perform your song.
So I chose a Tracy Chapman tune, and I'm going to play it on the banjo, and it is talking about a revolution. And I chose it because, well, we're in a revolution. So that's that. So, yeah. Am I still? Yeah, I think I'm still on. So what I'm going to do is, yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Saja.
Just checking, because I did switch to another internet channel, so I'm just making sure it works.
Sounds good.
Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. While they're standing on the welfare line, crying on the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Ooh, how don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Poor people gonna rise up, get their share. Poor people gonna rise up, take what's there. Don't you know you better run, 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 run. Don't you know you better run, 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 run. Finally the tables starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Oh, no. Talking about a revolution where they're standing in the welfare line, crying on the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment line, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Oh, don't you know it, talking about a revolution sounds like this. Finally the tables starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Finally the tables starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Hold on. Talking about a revolution, hold on. Talking about a revolution, hold on. And for those of you who don't know, the banjo is from Africa, so you are now watching something very ass authentic. Thank you.
Thank you, Saja. That was awesome. We're going to continue with the panel discussion for another 20 or so minutes before we move to Q&A. And the next question is, and if you weren't able to answer how are you engaging in the conversation on race and racism in America, feel free to continue that. The next question is, we need unity among all people of color communities to create true solidarity. What are your thoughts on how to address anti-Blackness experiences within the person of color communities?
I think we need to just make it relatable. We all have the minority status, quote unquote. And so everyone who is a minority has that reflection of being a victim in America. I feel like instead of competing with each other in that victimization, I feel like we need to, embrace our similarities of not having a voice until now, making our experiences relatable, helping each other in our protests, walking with each other so this is like Pride Month as well. So we need to, as Black people, as people of color, Indigenous folks, we need to stand with each other, and especially Indigenous communities. Indigenous communities in this country, the most original of the communities, have been very, very ignored. They were the first to be outcast, and they are still being ignored today. And I feel like Black people and the Latino community, if we can just stand by, and the Asian community, really first uplift the Indigenous folks, we go from the roots, we nourish the roots of America and go from there. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And the thing is, we have to stand with one another. We have to stand for one another, share our stories. I mean, recently I had seen on Twitter a news item about a Latinx man who was actually murdered by the police, and so we need to share the stories of each other's, the brutality against each community, and pretty much and pretty much make it public and stand together. The young man's name was Carlos Adrian Ingram Lopez, and he cried out for his grandmother as police handcuffed him face down for 12 minutes. He couldn't breathe. He was killed by police 2 months ago, but body cam video was just released. Officers must be held accountable. That was a Twitter, that was a tweet on June 24th.
Exactly. I feel like right now, because of this domino effect of George Floyd, that's why I love this time. I mean, we really need to recognize how amazing this time is, as painful and as uncomfortable and weeping and rendering of garments it is. We are seeing that we're shining the light on injustice for everyone. And even in the white community, the injustice in white America is that you didn't see this. The injustice is that many of you authentically went along with your daily lives, really truly rooting for justice, not thinking how deeply entrenched, or knowing how deeply entrenched it is. And so we need to take this energy and move it forward. And first, if you are in pain, again, I don't know if I got cut off during the 6 stages of grief, but I reiterate this highly. White America needs to go through the grieving process of their old lives, because now we have to all be a part of this talk and all know what's going on first before we can know how to heal, right? So we're in this cocoon of knowledge, and it's very uncomfortable in a cocoon. I feel like many people think a cocoon is like, oh, how pretty, the butterfly's coming soon, right? But the cocoon is very disgusting. It's like transformative. The poor little caterpillar's going like through all kinds of a hot mess, you know what I'm saying? And all kinds of goo. That's why you see the goo and disgustingness when that cocoon cracks open, because that caterpillar went through so much. And that's what we're going through right now. And if we can allow ourselves to embrace the uncomfortable, we can allow, it's like instead of fighting against the wave, if you just surf the wave, that's like one of the number one rules in surfing. Just go toward the wave. Go toward the wave. You got to go through it, and then you just ride it. And then you're going to see you can now rise above it and use it to your benefit. So I feel like that is where we all, white America, Black America, the Latino community, Asians, and the indigenous community, all of us need to be in the space wherever we are in that level of knowledge.
That's a good point, Saja. Thank you. We have to keep reminding ourselves that this is challenging and messy, and we're all learning. Let's all give each other grace and forgive and be kind to each other as we're all going through this learning process. The next question. Yeah, thank you. The next question.
Anthony didn't weigh in. Let Anthony weigh in.
I don't know if he's still on his phone call.
Oh, he's here.
He's available? Okay, great. We're going to unmute you, Anthony. Go ahead and accept that.
I'm going to be like the devil's advocate, right? So we have to own the fact that in America, the only history that was taught was white history, right? We have to own the fact that public schools were not funded the same for Black and brown children. We have to acknowledge the fact that separate but equal was a farce. And we also have to honor the fact that, like, the due credit to who actually built this country was really never given, right? So we have to at least start at that point and be okay with saying, okay, 4th of July is a great thing, but we still have slaves. We can't skate over that, right? We can't say that America is great, but like women couldn't vote.
You're not the devil's advocate. You're not the devil's advocate. You're just adding on to the knowledge. Yeah.
So because we have to talk about Reconstruction and that they didn't get the 40 acres and a mule. You have to talk about those things. We have to talk about the Voters' Rights Act of 1963 or 64, maybe. No, 65. I think I'm wrong. We have to talk about those things because if we don't talk about them, we'll keep repeating it, right? And then what we have to do after that is decide, okay, American history has to be all of its history, not just cherry picking what makes us look good. And the thing about it is that Black people in this country have to always know about white history. We have to know about the founding fathers and the American Revolution and, you know, all those wonderful things, but we don't ever have to like know about Jim Crow unless you go to college and you have a Black history course, right? Or we don't learn about Black authors because we just don't. We learn about time. We learn about, it's just, in order for us to get to where we need to go, we have to own it completely. And we have to make people feel uncomfortable. And white people, I'm sorry, and I love all my white people. I love y'all. You have to feel what Black people have felt for 400 years. Because it wasn't just that we had to know our own history. We had to know y'all's history and be okay with ours being neglected and obliterated.
I'm glad you brought that up, Anthony, because, about his story. Basically, we know white Americans and white America better than white America knows us because our very survival depends
on it.
Upon, that knowledge. We have to know how to negotiate and navigate this society, just from being in our neighborhoods to going out shopping to going to school to even in the corporate in corporate America. And so basically, there was a time when I was a kid that Black History Month was instated, but not everybody recognized it. And, I tend to cynically, I cynically kind of speak of it as being the shortest month of the year that they've given us, a chance to have history. But I mean, there's been opposition, all sorts of opposition to either the telling of Black history. It's trickled through, because of different, because of different people and things like that. But still, there are a great deal of white Americans who do not know the history of Black America, and many who, basically, get their stories from their drunk uncles, rather than from a historian in terms of, the history of this country. And we need to certainly, educate people more. It was interesting also concerning just us trying to make forward motion in this country, and even in terms of riots and things like that. In 1968, President Lyndon Johnson put together the Kerner Commission to basically study the rioting and the displeasure of Black people in America. And the Kerner report basically said that the reason for the riots was not so much Black anger as much as white racism. And so then Johnson tried to push that narrative, and it cost him politically because white Americans didn't want to hear it. And, as a result, things got brushed under the table in America.
Thank you, Phil and Saja and Anthony. It's great to see book groups on White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo popping up around Fort Collins. So let's see, the next question is, how do you address, if not me, then who, thinking that POC may find themselves in when in majority white spaces? So that we've seen some of our friends who are Black and other people of color who are experiencing equity fatigue. They're getting tired of explaining things to friends who are asking about it. And some are saying, leave me alone, go read this, go listen to this podcast, go watch this documentary. And others are finding it within themselves they might be an extrovert and finding themselves in conversations all the time. So how do you address that? If not me, then who? Thinking in the people of color communities when you're in majority white spaces. And Saja, would you like to go first? Sure. And then Anthony and Phil.
Sure. Yeah, that is a thing, because I have different conversations with Black folks about that than I do white folks. Black folks are, the introverts are like, introverts and extroverts in any race is the same. Read the room is my answer. You've got Black people around you who, like myself, are happily able to talk. Like, I was like, hallelujah, I was born for this time. Yes, Lord. You know what I'm saying? Versus other people are like, oh, good Lord, I'm so tired. Shut up. Please stop asking me these questions. Go to Saja. All right. So number one, go to me. All right. If you need to, but seriously, the first question you should ask is, to your Black friends is like, look, I know you're probably getting a lot of questions. Can I continue to talk to you, or can you give me a resource I can talk to? Be compassionate and know that there's two things we're going through. Number one, we've never been asked so much about our voice until now. And it's like a relief to all of us, but some of us are quite exhausted. All of us are, but some of us are charged, like myself, and some are like, good Lord, if you ask me one more damn question, I'm going to scream, right? So the number one question is, please help me. Are you okay to ask a question to, or what? And then Black people tell them, honestly, no, I'm not, or yes, I am. Next question, right? Number two is we're releasing a lot of trauma. I can't say that enough. We are under PTSD. We have post-traumatic stress disorder of racial trauma, that all these videos and all these things are triggering us. So that's why we're tired as well. We are seeing things that we are going through in a mirror on those videos, and it hurts. And it shakes sometimes. You shake and you all these triggers coming up from like getting pulled over in high school or watched in the store, or, for me, like getting dated because, by a white dude who is curious just for me being black, not has anything else to do with it. All these triggers are happening as well. So that's honestly the reason why a lot of us are tired. So just be kind enough to ask the question, are you capable to asking my question? If not, where can I go? Number one, go to Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. Number one, read that book. It is the first step, aside from white fragility, that gives you a common contemporary viewpoint. But if you want historical, journaled views of supremacy, Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States will show you from centuries ago what the feeling of supremacy was in the own person's accounts.
Great. Thank you, Saja. We have 5 minutes left in this segment of the panel discussion. So I'm going to give Anthony and Phil a choice of answering either that question or one of the following two. What's one thing we need to succeed in continuing the momentum of dismantling structural and institutional racism? Or how are you coping and still finding joy amidst all of this? So you can answer the question, if not me, then who? What's one thing we need to succeed in continuing the momentum of dismantling structural and institutional racism? And how are you coping and still finding joy amidst all of this? Anthony, would you like to go first, and then Phil?
For me, finding joy is knowing the relationships that I have with people and understanding that these relationships with, like, I keep going back to my Miller clan in Colorado because it was such an integral part of who I am today. If I had not had them as my family, as my support group, as my cheerleaders, I can tell you right now, I would be a very jaded black man, and I would not probably trust most white people, to be quite honest. If I did not have that core group of people in Colorado that came to me out of a very messed up situation, I would not be the man I am today. And I find joy in knowing that they support me. I find joy in knowing that they still check on me. I find joy in the things that they did to my family. My family came to visit Colorado. All these things bring me joy. And then what it did for me was allow me to deal with my own personal implicit bias against straight, middle-aged white men, which I had. And it caused me to see them in a different way. And because I saw them in a different way, it challenged me to be a better person. And so that's where I find my joy in this moment.
Thank you, Anthony. I want to point out, if you probably all know, Anthony had the courage to make public comments at City Council a few years ago and brought this to their attention, these incidents. Go ahead, Phil, if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, I'll just quickly, in terms of, joy, any joy I find is going to be, found in my faith. But I wanted to get back to the question about just being tired. This is the third Zoom conversation I've had on this topic in the past 2 weeks. And I've been having conversations, with my wife and friends. I mean, there was one Sunday that I got a call from two of my white male friends, saying, I'm sick of just responding to this with good intentions and a heart emoji. What can I do? And so that allowed us to have conversations. I've also been helping out at my church 1 day a week and starting to have those conversations. And one thing I've definitely noticed is that evangelical Christians tend to have, they tend to step back a little more and kind of have a more of a, what's the word, more of a, almost a head in the sand kind of reaction to this. And, but it's been interesting having these conversations that, because things have been coming up. And it was George Floyd that brought it up. Now, I want you to know that I go to a predominantly white church, which has been very, very open and has embraced me and my wife quite well. Even though, I walk through the hall sometimes and there's still people that, if I look them in the eye, they'll still look the other way or pretend I'm not there. But that doesn't seem to be the majority of folks there. But there are people there that I get a sense that they're uncomfortable with my being there. But the last conversation I had at my church with the other volunteers, at the end of it, I had told them, because when I was on my way there, I was like, I really am not going to bring this up. I'm not going to have this conversation. I'm kind of tired. And we got there and somebody brought something up and we started getting into it and talking about it. And I suggested things like, talk to your Black friends, watch Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th, get to know a little more about us. But at the end of the conversation, I said, I wasn't going to do this. We got into the conversation, but thank you for having the conversation. And one of them spoke up and said, well, what was cool was that we weren't speaking past one another. We were actually having a conversation, because a lot of what goes on, with topics of this type is that we start lobbing these bombs across the barrier or whatever, to either try to, gain advantage or to stop the conversation. I mean, there've been so many times when I've brought up race or tried to tell my stories, and, it's either been a dismissive or disbelieving attitude. So while I may get physically and emotionally and mentally tired, if somebody's going to ask the question and wants to have a true and genuine adult conversation about this, then I have to, because, I mean, all in the 6 decades of my life, most of the time that I've spoken up, I've been either ignored or pushed away or whatever. There have been times when people have listened, for sure. But this time is marked by an intense interest and curiosity that cannot be ignored. So we just have to keep having this conversation and ignore people like, there was one article I saw, it's like someone at a Black Lives Matter rally with a Confederate flag saying, I'm going to teach my grandchildren to hate you. And that's the kind of racism I understand. It's overt, it's in your face. And, that's usually, associated with Southern racism. But there's also a very, very subtle and insipid racism that kind of gets associated with the North that, that is not as much in your face. And we need to basically be aware of those things, identify them, talk about them, and try to overcome them.
We are now moving into the question and answers. And if your question that you had in mind hasn't already been answered during the discussion, please feel free to type your question in the chat or use the raise hand icon to raise your hand. And it looks like we have one question from Victoria, if Ricardo would like to unmute himself and tell us what Victoria's question is.
Sure. So the full question is there, but I paraphrased it down, and Victoria, raise your hand or whatever if I get it wrong. But basically, Victoria is asking, she says, Black people are only 1.6% of the population in Fort Collins. And as a recruiter, I think she worked as a recruiter for Hewlett Packard, and she knows that support systems of every kind are lacking. She asks, how do you suggest, or how do we change that? What's some things we can do to change that?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the question is, how do we improve or put in place support systems? Is that the question?
I think so, or at least how do we make it so that at least more Black people will choose to live here or can live here, right? So that some of those barriers get knocked down.
Well, I think Fort Collins is, in certain ways, has been doing that. I remember, like, you know, the mayor making a proclamation, and basically, I mean, businesses and companies just need to kind of, you know, reach out to Black people, people of color, and ask what can we do. I mean, there are lists of Black businesses in Fort Collins. So one way to start is, you know, just by asking people directly, and know that in time the POC population of Fort Collins is going to grow over time. So something like that is just going to take time, but, you know, just kind of keep at it.
Yeah. I didn't know it was 1.6. Darn. We're barely here. I tell you what. I'm Southern. I keep it real.
Yeah, we do. Thank you for pointing that out. Businesses owned by people of color on the resources page of diversefortcollins.com, and that's linking to other organizations who have compiled those lists, including the Black African American Cultural Center at CSU. So we appreciate those resources. Yeah, Saja or Anthony, go ahead, Saja.
Yeah, I'm a Black business here in Fort Collins, and like I'm sorry I cut out for a second because there's thunderstorms around me, so it's like, you know. So I'm just, as a Black business in Fort Collins, it is important that you reach out to us, not just for support, but to just spread the word on who we are. You know, as white people learn more about their own communities and who are here, it's just another resource that you have, and another rich resource of not only a Black business. It's like you get the Black essence of the business. You get the personality of a Black business. It's like eating soul food versus like Mexican food versus a pot roast. You know what I'm saying? It's like they all are delicious, but they have their own essences. So from a musical standpoint, I have a music instruction studio. I teach from a Southern soul perspective, no matter if it's punk, rock, soul, whatever. I teach from that. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to reach out to Black businesses, because they just offer the essence of Blackness as well as helping out, you know?
And another way is just showing more representation in media locally, you know, in ads and things like that, and signage. Show more people of color, you know, who are here in Fort Collins. You know, and I know the local media certainly reports on some of the local events. I know that the Coloradoan reported on the Juneteenth event that took place at the city of Fort Collins on Juneteenth last year. So things like that are nice as well. And the thing is to remember, don't try to just put a person of color in to, you know, fill that quota. You know, find somebody who's going to be qualified and do the job, but certainly make an effort to find someone, because otherwise we're going to, you know, have situations where, you know, a clothing company and an advertising agency will create a T-shirt that a Black child is wearing in an ad that says "smartest monkey in the jungle." So we have to have representation in order to avoid these kind of faux pas, and we have to have executives who are willing to listen, to genuinely listen to the voices of people of color when they raise the red flag.
Thank you, Phil. Would you, Anthony, would you like to weigh in on that question?
Sorry, y'all. I'm just family emergency. I feel like we can't stop with just the moments of your company has released a statement and we stand with Black Lives Matter. It's not it's not just that. We can't allow a statement, a t-shirt, a pendant, a banner, and then 3 weeks later it's back to normal. We have to demand of everyone in every part of society that inclusion, equity, and understanding is necessary to enrich all of us. It's not just enough to make a statement, and it's not just enough to hire a Black person or a Latina person or an Asian in this position. It's to scatter, smatter, covered in chunk. That's a reference from Waffle House. In all areas of your organization. Because in all those places, you can find moments where you didn't see something, or there's a different perspective from yours because it's not your reality. And if we do that, if we consistently, genuinely, lovingly do that, we'll be better in this world. And this country can go far. And we have to let go of ego. We have to let go of pride. We have to let go of self-preservation and think about everybody. It's just like the masks going out in public with this COVID. Like, it's not just about you. It's not just about you getting a haircut. It's not just about you going to get your suntan on. It's about everybody. And I find it very, very ironic that we're having this pandemic and then this huge racial shift in America at the same time. I don't believe it's by coincidence or circumstance.
And we're at a very pivotal point in history. And it really is going to depend on what side we're going to emerge. But, there are interesting things that I'm hearing, like, conservative Republicans in Mississippi calling for a replacement of the flag, a changing of the state flag. So, if we can keep that kind of movement going outside of an election year, then we could very well come out on the right side of history through this. But we still have to persevere. We have to have those difficult conversations. And we also have to realize that mistakes are going to be made. And so we have to give ourselves and give each other the grace to, as some would say, ask stupid questions, say, run the risk of saying something that might be the wrong thing. But if we can, just allow ourselves to be educated through all this and be committed to being lifelong learners about race and about, how each side feels about the other, then, we could very well change this country. I mean, in 2044, 2045, they said that they projected that America is going to be a minority majority company. So on some level, it would behoove white America to actually engage in this conversation now, so that when that time comes, that the same consideration that they were given would be given to them as well. So,
Thank you, Phil. Ricardo, there are a lot of other questions in the chat. Let's
see. So Juan asks, what is your sense of the justice system here in Colorado? Is it fair or biased like everywhere else?
I have no idea. I've never experienced it. But I will say, though, when I came here, whenever I go to a new town, I'm always wary of the police. And so far, I've not had to worry about that here in Fort Collins. And I was actually told that I didn't have anything to worry about from the local police. So I'll have to take people at their word until proven otherwise. Catherine, I believe you wanted to say something?
I was just saying that I'm going to unmute Saja because it looks like she wanted to respond.
Yeah, Anthony's got a good one on this. Like, it's a mixed medium here. I've noticed. I watched the same thing like Phil did. I always watch the cops, and and just make sure we're like what the vibe is there. But yeah, I'm really impressed personally with what's going on. I've had more racial instances from non-cops here than cops. So, but I think Anthony has an interesting story about the. Do you have? All right, Anthony, are you here? Anthony?
Well, yeah, I'm here.
What do you feel about it? Just as a black man in Fort Collins, when you were here, did you have any instances?
Hold on 1 second. Let me start my video again. So Fort Collins for me was a mixed bag because there were moments where I was like praised, and there were moments where I was like, ugh, this black guy. Like, I didn't fit into the basketball team. I wasn't on the football team. I had nothing to do with the university. I'm just here being my black self. And just walking around and people grabbing their purses or people being surprised by my education or my life experiences was really, really like troubling for me because I had to be like, I always felt like I had to validate myself. And once I validated myself, then I was cool. You know what I'm saying?
What about the cops? They asked about the cops.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to be very, very honest right now. So I got a DUI when I was in Colorado. So I have a firsthand encounter with the cops in Fort Collins. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. When I did my field sobriety test, I had on a toga. We laugh about it now. I literally did a field sobriety test in a toga. And I was surrounded by 4 cops. Now, why in Fort Collins, Colorado, did it take 4 police officers to do a field sobriety test? I will never know. But they did. And 3 of them didn't record it until I said, I'm not doing this anymore until I see everybody's lights on their dash thing. What's it called? On. I'm not doing it.
The body cams.
Thank you. I'm not doing it. You know what I'm saying? And they said little slick things. And I just really tried to make myself fall under the radar. The flip side of that, though, was it made me understand what the penal system in America is like for black and brown people. And my saving grace was that I was educated and that I could speak up for myself. If I didn't have those 2 things, I would have got lost in that system. And it worked in my favor. But to see the cops there, nope, not good at all. But I don't like cops anyway. But that's just it. I don't. Just don't like it.
It is hard. It is hard, honestly, white America, to have black people ask that question without any kind of reservations, because we've had more instances of negativity with cops, honestly, than we have positive. And it could be like the most positive person in the world. You know what I'm saying? And I know cops, I like personally, and it's fine, but like the whole institution itself is very corrupt, and it needs to be totally redone. And we are seeing it with defunding, and the defunding is fine, but it's not just about defunding. We have people who are supposed to protect and to serve only going through a 6.
I think we lost Saja. Ricardo, could you choose another question from the chat for Anthony?
Sure. Yes. So the next question is from Amanda, and I saw someone raise their hand. I'm not ignoring you. It's just you raised your hand after several of these questions came in. So this next question is from Amanda, and Amanda asks, in terms of white allies affecting change through action, what actions do you think would be the most effective, like fundraising, educating other white people, donating, continue to rally, pressuring legislators, pressuring businesses?
Well, I know one thing, Diverse Fort Collins is, I think Catherine had mentioned before, having the book club meetings, and I think they've been going through books like White Fragility. So, there's the education quotient of the whole thing. And then if anybody else wants to weigh in on that.
I'll just say really quickly that Diverse Fort Collins is hosting a book group conversation about the novel There by Native author Tommy Orange, prize-winning novel, and that will be July 26th, and you can find the details at diversefortcollins.com/events. And Saja's back.
We might need to repeat the question in case she wants to weigh in.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's thundery over here.
Sure, I can repeat the question really quickly. So Amanda asks, in terms of white allies affecting change through action, what actions do you think would be most effective, like fundraising, educating other white people, donating, rallying, pressuring legislators, pressuring businesses, etc.?
Educating other white people, number one, because they'll listen to you because you got white skin, 100%. That's like, you immediately do not have brown skin, so there's immediately not a defense. And that's what the people who you are having an issue with now have. They want to be right first. They're not trying to learn anything. They need to win. So you need to show them that there is reasoning behind all of this upheaval. And this is where your white skin is an advantage, because you can talk about these things and say, listen, I understand where you are. Maybe I was there, or I thought the same thing. But I'm hearing and seeing these videos, and I just have to ask you, like, how can you not question these as a fellow white person? That's where it is. And then the more numbers you get, you can go to the legislative level, which they are doing right now, then the protests. But you got to talk amongst each other. You have to. It's your time. Ball's in your court. We've done everything we can. We can talk one-on-one. We can reach out to each other, absolutely. But if you have family members who are racist, you are the key. And I know it's hard because we all have that messed up drunk uncle that is just messed up, and you're like, Lord have mercy, he's here again, right? But it's time to now talk about that. It's time to reach out and give reasons, personal accounts, because as family members, that helps a lot.
And
go ahead.
Sorry, let me just say real quick. There's another question from Anna about White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and I think this answer applies, like Saja's answer applies to that as well. Okay.
I'm sorry, what is the question? The second question?
Oh, sorry. No. I was just saying that there's another question from Anna about the book White Fragility, and whether it's okay for white people to educate other white people, and some like.
Damn straight. Absolutely. Right. Hook it up. Like, hook it us. Help us help you. Like, that's what it is. Please. You have that. I told you that your white skin is a pass, because again, I reiterate, people like who can't see it immediately see brown skin, and they're already at war. So please use your access.
And that that term, those terms, white fragility, white privilege, they tend to be like emotional minefield terms for some folks. So hearing it from a fellow white person, kind of breaking it down and explaining it, would probably go down a lot easier, because I've noticed over the years of just talking about racism and sharing my stories, the defensiveness seems to come from a sense of the person feeling accused that I'm talking to. And we're not accusing anybody.
Amen.
We're not accusing people. We're just trying to bring up the problem. We're just trying to state a reality. And now let's have a conversation, but also talk amongst yourselves, because you will trust one another. Some of you will trust one another before you trust any of us, in terms of having that conversation.
Absolutely.
If I can, this is Ricardo. If I can say one quick comment, is the one point that someone made about white fragility, the book, is that there are more books. Like, that's a good starting off point, or that may be a good starting off point for some people. But there's more, right? There's more to learn. And so there are books written by people of color, by Black people, that you can continue down that path.
How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi.
Yeah.
That's one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also, there's a website that Harvard has put up called Project Implicit. And it is a questionnaire that helps to ferret out people's implicit biases. And they do exist. The implicit bias exists. It even goes into the world of computing. There's a young woman by the name of Joy Buolamwini, and she calls herself the poet of code if you want to go to her website. But basically, she's looked into facial recognition software, and she did tests with white faces, and then she did a test with her own face, a black face, and the software did not recognize her. And so, there can even be implicit bias in something as seemingly innocuous as computer code. Now, she went to a bunch of corporations also to try to, tell them about this, to work with all of these different companies. And the only corporation that took her up on that was IBM.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to wrap it up. Carter, do you have one more question that we can ask the panelists?
I do. I was going to say something really important that came up last week. One is a coincidence that the guy who came up with the implicit that website, Project Implicit and Implicit Association Test, was my advisor in graduate school.
Oh, nice. Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah.
The really important point I wanted to make is that it's important to know that implicit bias exists. You can go and you can measure it for yourself on this website. It's a really fun test that I worked on, so I would appreciate it if you go and used it. But the really important thing is that implicit bias training is not really as effective as people like to think it is. And I'm just saying this from the academic world. And what the creator of this test says is that we need to change the structure, the systemic racism in the structure. That's how you address it. You don't address it by, having a meeting and then that's it, at Starbucks. You have to change things until that discrimination ends, until there's a balance and an equality. And then you measure it to see if it works. And then if it doesn't, you just change it again and again. Okay, sorry about that. Another question is from Danielle, who asks, what do you feel are the most effective ways to use social media for this cause? Like, for example, how did you feel about Blackout Tuesday?
I don't know. It was all right. It was good for a lot of businesses that needed a hard drive, but, one day doesn't really make a difference. It was much appreciative. But I think it was more just like declaring, recognizing what needed to be done. If we're going to have Blackout Tuesday, we need to, I don't know, necessarily just promote businesses of color, honestly. Like, I personally am not interested in just like, let's have a day, blah, blah, blah. No, it needs to be a thing, a normal thing that Black businesses and businesses of color are just valid and a part of the American dream and the business structure, and period. And it was great at first. That was great. Blackout Tuesday, fine, but spread it out to a time release to where it's 365 days a year.
Yeah, Blackout Tuesday was a good thought. It did cause problems when people were using the Black Lives Matter and BLM hashtags, because then those people who were organizing the movement, they would go to websites where they were looking at tweets and things like that, and they would see all black, just blank screen. So So if things like that are going to take place, then, we have to think it through and, make sure that it's not interrupting the normal flow of conversation and organization. But the other thing is, the stories that you see online, share them with, because you may be the only person in your network that your friends are going to see stories from. Now, on Facebook, my friends probably think I've lost my ever-loving mind and I'm some sort of militant, because I just been seeing all these different stories, and I was like, people need to know about that. They need to know that, or this is nuts, So it's and some people have responded like, wow, or thanks. So make sure that you're keeping people aware of what's going on from reputable sources, of course, and try not to get to a point where you're throwing where you're getting too emotional or too political or whatever. Just try to make it you're sharing factual information that needs to be addressed, and then maybe have that conversation in the comments.
Yes, 100%.
What would be?
It is.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Say your thought.
It's just time for compassion. My dad is a computer scientist and mathematician. He did a lot of debating teams, and he taught me an amazing rule. You attack the issue, not the person, and that is hard because sometimes you want to tear a motherfucker up, but you need to not do that because most black people are valid in that thing right now. So what I do is go within and I say, how can I have this post be more valid? Just post it. Don't try to go, I can't believe it. Why can't you? No, don't do that. Just post it with a heart, you know what I'm saying? Or, wow, I didn't know. And by the way, I did know about the Western Museum. Somebody had a question on that. Buffalo Soldier by Bob Marley talks about the Western, the black cowboys. That's the Buffalo Soldier. Buffalo meaning the wool of our head. That song is about black Western cowboys. Buffalo Soldier, I'm in America. Just listen to it again. But yes, that is for whoever did that. Tony, yeah, that's, yes, I did know. But check out Buffalo Soldier. But yes, compassion, please. It is time for us to be heart-centered. You have identity. Use your self-identity and be heart-centered and approach it, especially with these people you want to just smack out hardcore. Use it and just post the post. That's it. And again, like Phil said, use it in the in the comments because those can get great.
And
Thank you, Sasha.
And you make it a situation where somebody might make an off-color statement or try to be a rabble rouser, but just try your best to either ignore them or have a a conversation, but don't respond in kind.
Yeah. Don't feed the fire.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Sasha, Phil, Anthony. Thank you, Tony and Mia and others for posting resources in the chat. We're going to wrap up, and before we do, I'm going to say thank you very much to Saja Butler, Phil Donaldson, and Anthony McGlone for sharing your experiences, insights. We're grateful for you being vulnerable and spending this time with us. Thanks, Ricardo, for operations assistance and watching. Keep an eye on the chat for us. Thanks to Mia Donnelly for hosting the event earlier this month for us, for just Black folks, for a space to process and breathe, and for helping me develop the idea for this event. I want to point out that we have 2 upcoming events later this summer. July 26th is our book discussion of There by Native author Tommy Orange. We're going to have special Native guests, the artist Gregg Deal, community member and activist Amber Lane, and Jan Iron of Northern Colorado Intertribal Powwow Association will be saying a few words before we get into the book discussion. That's July 26th. Then August 16th is a free webinar by Larimer County's first Latino district court judge, Juan Villaseñor, on the impact of COVID-19 on the Larimer County Justice System and Q&A. So check out his guest commentary on our website, diversefortcollins.com, and you can read more about his journey to the U.S. and to Fort Collins in that guest commentary. And I wanted to end by letting Phil, Saja, and Anthony, if there's anything else you'd like to add about your call to action. What would you like us to read, do, listen to a podcast? What would you like to share with us?
Actually, I just wanted to mention, because there was a question about what we can do. It would be interesting to actually do a series of Zoom calls where Black people and white people actually, sit at a round table and talk it out. And then, keep having these, even once the restrictions, are relaxed in terms of us meeting face to face. That's going to be the best. If we could just, have events where we sit and we talk it out.
I agree. Like now, thank you, by the way, for everybody who was white just listening. I agree,
Yes.
Phil.
Thank
if we
you,
want to
yeah.
just, if we want to talk about it, please call 1-800-BLACKNESS. That's 1-800-BLACKNESS. I'm just kidding. That's not a phone. That's not a number.
And Anthony.
I think the biggest thing is that people need to be okay with being vulnerable.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And know that you don't know what you don't know. And that's all.
Yeah, read Brené Brown. She'll teach you about vulnerability.
And I love you.
Yo, Anthony,
Amen.
I want that horse and dragon T-shirt, man.
No, you can't have it. You cannot have this.
Thank y'all
We
so much.
really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. And the music. Thank you, Anthony
Thank
and
you,
Saga,
yes.
for your beautiful
Thank you, guys.
voices and music.
Appreciate y'all.
And thanks for having
Thank
us,
you.
everyone. Thanks, Catherine.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you,
Phil,
Catherine.
for Zoom. We appreciate
Ricardo.
the Zoom account. And thank you, everyone who joined us. We appreciate you listening, appreciate your time, and see you at an upcoming event. Bye, everybody.